The glass doors slid open. Alina Royce stepped into the soaring lobby of Barrington Capital Group, a billion-dollar financial empire perched atop one of Manhattan's tallest towers. The lobby gleamed with power-polished marble floors, crystal chandelier bigger than a car, and leather seating arranged like museum pieces. Executives in tailored suits strode with purpose, their footsteps sharp, eyes busy. Elena's shoes made no sound. Flat, beige, and well-worn, they contrasted with the designer heels clicking around her. Her white linen blouse was clean and crisp, but simple, no frills, no logo. Her cream slacks were tailored but humble, no jewelry, no makeup beyond lip balm. In one hand, she carried a canvas tote bag slightly faded with a notebook, a pen, and a wealth-hummed copy of The Wealth of Nations. At the marble reception desk sat a young woman named Kelsey, her sleek bun held tight with a gold pin, nails like sharpened glass. Kelsey's eyes flicked up, down, then paused at the tote. "Deliveries go around the back," she said flatly. Alina smiled gently. "I'm here for the VP of Strategy interview." There was a flicker of something disbelief, maybe amusement tan Kelsey's face. She tapped a button and said, "Candidate for interview." Unconventional appearance. Then she pointed to a side hallway. "Take the service corridor, HR's request." Heads turned as Alina walked past. A cluster of young candidates, polished and perfumed, exchanged smirks. One leaned toward another and whispered, "She looks like she's here to clean the place." Alina heard it, but her eyes didn't waver. Quiet grace was her shield. "Before we continue, please do subscribe to my channel." Down the corridor, past the glass conference rooms and into the waiting lounge, the energy shifted. Around a sleek table sat a group of candidates, each one a walking resume. Gucci ties, Prada pumps, cufflinks that gleamed like armor. Alina quietly took a seat in the corner. A man in a pinstripe suit named Jared Holt caught sight of her. He didn't bother whispering. "Look at that tote." "What did she bring, groceries?" Laughter followed. A tall woman in a fitted emerald jacket. Leah. Tate tilted her phone and snapped a photo. "No filter needed," she muttered, captioning. "It in a group chat? Candidate or cafeteria crew?" Another man, Ethan Crane, adjusted his Rolex and shook his head. "They don't let her near the boardroom rug." Phones flashed again. Smirks widened. Elena's fingers clutched the handles of her tote slightly tighter. Her hazel eyes stayed soft, but now they were steeled. An HR assistant, Nimily Voss, young and sharp, stood at the door, clipboard in hand. She glanced over the group and hesitated when she reached Alina. Emily checked the list, then smirked. "You, ... Must be Alina Royce," she said slowly. "Interesting outfit choice." There was no greeting, no warmth, only cold assessment. Behind her, Jared coughed. "No suit, no shot." The other candidates laughed again, sharp and practiced, as if this was part of the test, and Alina. She sat taller. Dignity was her armor, and she had worn it for years. A frosted glass door slid open. Inside, the next candidate vanished into the interview chamber. Alina remained seated, her turn still far off, if it would ever come. A few minutes later, Emily returned and called out two names. Elena's wasn't one of them. As others passed her to shake hands and exchange pleasantries, Emily leaned toward her again. "Just so you know," she said, her voice low but clear, "Alterara doesn't really hire unorthodox applicants. The panel values professionalism." Elena's lips parted just slightly. She didn't reply. "Oh," Emily added with a grin, "and try not to look nervous when Callahan speaks. He doesn't like ... trembling." It drew another snicker from Jared, who had taken out a crumpled dollar bill. He flicked it toward her feet. "For your dry cleaning," he smirked. Even the receptionist peeking in from behind the glass didn't object. The cruelty was open, casual, and accepted. Alina looked down at the dollar. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she quietly pulled her book from her tote, opened to a folded page, and began reading. The murmurs faded around her as she let there. Scorn washed over her like cold rain, familiar, but never welcome. Leah leaned over to Jared and whispered, "I swear, I saw her type something on an actual notepad." "She probably thinks whiteboards are witchcraft," Ethan added. More chuckles. Then a flash. Ethan had snapped another picture and sent it to a private Slack channel. "Hat budget candidate reporting for rejection." The group chat buzzed. With likes, Elena's page didn't turn. Her eyes stayed fixed, but her breath tightened just slightly. Another candidate murmured behind her, "Bet she doesn't even have LinkedIn Premium." Just then, the door opened again. Mr. Jared Holt. Emily called, her voice brighter than before. Jared stood, brushed his lapels, and winked at Alina. "Stay warm out here." As the door closed behind him, the others chuckled and returned to their banter. But one woman, a younger candidate in a navy skirt, glanced at Alina, uncertainty in her eyes. A moment of doubt, flicker of guilt. Alina felt it, but didn't show it. The stage was theirs for now. Inside her, the fire was quiet, not weak. Never weak, just waiting. The door opened again. and Emily stepped into the hallway. "Alina Royce," she called, her voice flat. Alina stood, smoothing her blouse, and walked in silently. The interview room was vast and cold glass walls on one side, steel shelves of awards on the other. A long, polished table sat in the center, where 3 people waited. At the head was Michael Callahan, jar director, barrel-chested, smug, his dark gray suit almost aggressive in its sharpness. Beside him sat Vanessa Clean, senior manager, her red lipstick as striking as the crimson trim on her tailored blazer. The third was David Reese, director of operations, quietly smug, gold cufflinks, glinting like teeth every time he turned. Page. As Alina entered, the air turned tense. Callahan leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "You're the candidate," he said, not bothering to hide his tone. "I thought you were from the hospitality team," Vanessa added smoothly. "That shirt, ... Alina sat down, calm and upright. "I'm here for the strategy VP role," she replied, her voice even. David barely glanced at her resume. "This," he raised it with 2 fingers, then dropped it. "We'll get to that eventually." Vanessa smiled like she was watching a cat struggle in water. Callahan crossed his arms. "Let's start with the basics. Tell us why you think you belong here." The real interview hadn't started, but the real judgment already had. "Before we dive in," Vanessa said, tapping her iPad, "we'd like your reaction to this." The wall screen behind them lit up. A slide appeared. Candidate attire standards. On the left, a well-dressed executive. On the right, a zoomed photo of Alina taken moments ago sitting in the hallway. Over her image, a massive red. David grinned. "Look familiar?" Image had been uploaded in real time. Someone had snapped her photo, likely from the hallway. This wasn't an interview, it was a trap. Callahan leaned forward, pretending concern. "You do know this is a financial leadership role, right? We expect a certain image." "I dressed respectfully," Alina replied calmly. "Competence doesn't wear logos." Vanessa let out a laugh. "Cute." David then placed a thick folder in front of her. "You've got 3 minutes. These are mock merger summaries. Spot the flaw." Alina opened the folder. Dozens of pages, conflicting numbers, unmarked currency conversions. "A deliberate mess. I'll do what I can," she said quietly. Their pens tapped as she began. The screen behind her still mocked her linen blouse. Callahan checked his watch. Vanessa smirked. The room wasn't measuring intelligence. It was poking until something bled. As Alina wrote, the door creaked open again. Jared Holt stepped in, uninvited, flashing a knowing smile at the panel. "Just checking in," he said. "Want to see the competition?" Callahan laughed. "Don't worry, you've got this in the bag." Jared grinned at Alina. "Did you finish your 3-minute miracle?" Vanessa leaned forward. "Almost done here. We're just giving her the stress test." David tossed another folder onto the table. "Round 2. Let's see your analysis of this budget cut across 3 global regions with different tax laws." Lena blinked. "There's no context. You've got 5 minutes, Callahan barked. Vanessa clicked her pen loudly. "You want to lead global strategy, right? Consider this real-world pressure." The timer began. Outside the glass walls, candidates watched. Phones recorded. David looked up at the camera and mouthed, "Watch this." This wasn't an interview, it was theater. And Alina was cast as the fool, but she didn't fold. Her hand moved steadily across the page. Eyes flicked from one line to the next, parsing chaos with practiced speed. Jared, still watching, frowned slightly. There was steel beneath her. Silence. Time buzzed. Vanessa snatched the papers from Alina's hand and skimmed the top line without reading. Not bad if we were hiring assistants." David gave a theatrical sigh. "You bombed it." Callahan stood, clearly finished. "Wrong outfit, wrong energy, not what we're looking for." Lena opened her mouth to speak, but Vanessa cut her off. "No presence, no polish. You wouldn't survive one client dinner?" David snapped his fingers. "Oh, by the way, can we get security to check that tote? Just ... standard practice?" A guard near the door raised his brow. Callahan waved him forward. "Now let's make sure she's not walking out with company property." As the guard approached, Alina rose from her seat. Her hazel eyes scanned the panel, the mockery still fresh in the air. She said nothing, just calmly unzipped her tote. Out came her notebook, her pen. "What? ... in the worn book on economic principles." The guard muttered, clear, and stepped back, but not before muttering, "Weird." Vanessa laughed again. Callahan leaned over Alina's resume, untouched on the table. With a sharp motion, tore it in half and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "We're done here," he said, voice like stone. "Don't bother coming back." Outside, phones recorded as Alina stepped back into the hallway, into whispers, chuckles, and quiet cruelty. But no one noticed her. Eyes, they weren't angry. They were watching, learning. Waiting, Jenna returned. to the lobby, her eyes slightly puffy from holding back emotions, but her posture tall and composed. She sat quietly, watching other candidates walk in and out of rooms, some smiling, some confused, a few clearly shaken. Her heart beat fast. But she breathed deeply to keep herself grounded. That's when a young woman with short blonde hair, tailored navy pantsuit, and heels that echoed confidently on the marble floor stopped in front of Jenna. "You're still here?" she asked, eyes scanning Jenna's simple clothes and flat shoes. "I thought HR would have weeded you out already." Jenna blinked. "Excuse me?" "I saw how they looked at you. Let me guess. No corporate experience, no degree. From some Ivy League school and definitely no connections, right?" Jenna kept her voice soft. "I'm just here to interview." The woman leaned in, her tone sharp. "This company eats people like you alive. If you make it through the next round, I'll be shocked. Honestly, you won't last a week here." She straightened and strutted toward another corridor. The receptionist, who'd been listening from behind her computer, called over gently, "Don't mind her. She's insecure." Jenna turned and offered a weak smile. "That obvious? Obvious?" The receptionist nodded, giving Jenna a wink. "The ones who have to say things like that usually are." The next name was called, and Jenna stood again. This time she was led to a smaller room, more informal, with just 2 interviewers seated. Across a low table, there was no panel, no cold introductions. One of the women glanced up from a tablet. "Jenna Monroe, come on in. We've been looking forward to this part." Jenna's brow furrowed. "You have?" The other smiled kindly. "This round is less about your resume, more about who you are." For the next 40 minutes, Jenna talked honestly about how she'd worked 2 jobs to put her brother through college, about her mother's illness, and how learning to navigate healthcare bills had taught her patience and detail. About managing a small local business where she'd helped restructure their payment system. Just to keep them afloat during the pandemic, the interviewers listened without judgment, occasionally jotting down notes, but mostly just listening. One even laughed when Jenna told a story about rescuing a printer with duct tape during a wedding event. "You made it sound like a spy mission," the woman said through a smile. Jenna chuckled nervously. It felt like one. When she left the room, one of the women stood to shake her hand. "Whatever happens next, thank you for being real. We don't get a lot of that." As Jenna waited for the elevator back to the lobby, the blonde woman from earlier reappeared, walking quickly with her phone in hand. She noticed Jenna standing there and rolled her eyes. "You again?" she muttered. Jenna said nothing this time. The elevator dinged. They both stepped in. Silence filled the small space. Then, as the doors closed, the woman sneered. "You're going to be crushed if you think this company values heart over hustle. Trust me, I've worked here before. Got laid off when I called out my boss for stealing. Credit, this place doesn't reward good girls. It rewards survivors." Jenna looked over calmly. "Maybe being good is the strongest kind of survival." The woman scoffed. Just then, the elevator stopped on the executive floor on error. The doors opened, and standing there was a tall man with silver streaks in his hair and an unmistakable presence. He stepped in, nodded at both women, and pressed the button for the top floor. The blonde woman immediately straightened, put on a charming smile. "Mr. Keaton," she said smoothly. He nodded again but didn't speak. Jenna stood still, calm, watching the panel light up floor by floor. One thing about the man's posture felt familiar. When they reached the top floor, he exited without a word. But before the doors closed, he turned slightly and glanced at Jenna with a curious look. Just a fraction of recognition in his eyes, then vanished. Later that evening, Jenna sat on a bench outside the building, unsure whether she'd be called back again. The sun was setting, the gold streaks lighting up the glass of Monroe, holdings like fire. The receptionist stepped outside for a smoke break and saw Jenna still sitting there. She walked over. "You waiting for a cab?" Jenna shook her head, just catching my breath. The receptionist sat beside her. People think this place is all cutthroat. And yeah, there's some of that. Monroe built it differently. Before it got this big, he used to say, "The best minds aren't always in the boardroom. Sometimes they're stocking shelves at night." Jenna's heart gave a small, startled thud. She turned, said, "That," the woman nodded. "He died a few years ago, but his daughter's supposed to be taking over soon. Rumor has it she's more like him. Kind, sharp. Hates elitism." Jenna looked down at her hands. "What's her name?" The receptionist thought for a second. "Don't remember. But people say she's kept her identity quiet. Some say she's even been sitting in on interviews lately to find out who's fake and who's real." A soft breeze stirred Jenna's hair. In that moment, she knew something no one else did. Not yet, and she wasn't going anywhere. By the time 11 a.m. rolled around, the boardroom on the 17th floor was filled with tension. Everyone who had mistreated Layla during her interview was there. Donna, a panel, even the smug receptionist who had told her to wait endlessly. They sat in silence, unsure why they were called. But sensing it wasn't good, Mr. Hallbridge entered first. wearing a dark navy suit, the lines on his face etched deeper than usual. His face held the same mix of anticipation and regret he had shown Layla the night before. Then the double doors swung open behind him. Layla entered, calm, graceful, and dressed in a simple white blouse with pearl buttons and wide-legged beige trousers. She wore no jewelry, no brand-name power, just quiet confidence. Heads turned, mouths hung open. No one could hide their surprise. Donna's face went pale. The receptionist gripped the edge of her chair. Mr. Halbridge cleared his throat and addressed the room. "I've asked you all here to introduce someone important," he said, nodding toward Layla. "This is Ms. Layla Amin. As of this morning, she is chairwoman of Halbridge Group." You could hear a pin drop. "I expect every member of this organization to offer her the same respect you would offer me," he continued. "She is not just a colleague. She is the guiding voice of this company moving forward." Then he turned and gave a full bow to Layla. "Welcome, chairwoman." Layla nodded graciously. "Thank you, Mr. Halbridge." It took a moment for anyone to react. Layla stood at the front of the room, composed, while the air filled with disbelief and confusion. Donna stood up abruptly. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice trembling. She wasn't even qualified to interview for the analyst role." Layla turned to her with a calm that made everyone else sit straighter. "You're right, Donna. I was overqualified." She took a slow step forward. "You didn't see me because you didn't want to. You dismissed me by my clothes, by my name, by the silence I chose over arrogance." Donna blinked rapidly. "But how?" "How are you chairwoman?" Layla finished. "Because I own 52% of Halbridge shares. That's how." Someone gasped. The receptionist covered her mouth. A member of the interview panel shifted uncomfortably in their seat. "I didn't come here to punish anyone," Layla continued, her voice still soft. "But I did come here to change the culture. I'll be assessing everyone in this room over the coming weeks." Her eyes met Donna's. "Some will stay, others won't." Once the formal introduction ended, Layla requested to speak privately with the original interview panel. They shuffled into a smaller conference room, visibly uneasy. Layla entered last and closed the door gently behind her. She looked each of them in the eye. "Let's begin again," she said. "This time, I'll be asking the questions." They stared at her, unsure if this was symbolic or literal. "Tell me," she continued, folding her hands on the table. "What would you say is the most important quality in a team member here at Halbridge?" A man in a gray tie answered nervously. Experience? Efficiency?" Layla shook her head softly. "No, humanity. Compassion. The ability to see. People. Without that, you can't lead anyone, not in this era." She paused. "When you interviewed me, you failed the test. You didn't look beyond your expectations. You didn't ask what I had overcome to walk into that room." One woman whispered, "We were wrong." Layla nodded. "Yes. But here's the good news. Wrong can be corrected, if you're willing to learn." The rest of the day moved like a ripple across still water. Emails were sent. Departments were notified. Layla Amin's photo was added to the executive directory, but no one could stop talking about what had happened in that morning's meeting. The once simple woman they had mocked was now their chairwoman. But Layla wasn't finished. She visited each floor, spoke to janitors, secretaries, interns. She sat with the cafeteria staff and asked about their families. She asked the finance team what resources they were lacking and what they needed to work better, not faster, but better. People began to smile when she entered. The same receptionist, who once dismissed her, brought her tea without being asked. And Donna. She was quiet for days, shrinking into the background. Layla didn't fire her yet, but she made her attend empathy training. Twice a week. Donna hated it, but something told her she needed it. At the end of the week, Layla held her first town hall meeting as chairwoman. Her speech was short. "Power isn't in how loudly you speak," she said. "It's in how deeply you listen." And the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Myra sat alone outside the interview building. Her heels kicked off beside her and her shoulders sagging. The cold bench didn't bother her. It was the silence that did. She had come with dreams. She left with a hollow ache. As she sipped water from a small paper cup, a woman passed by and did a double take. "Mira?" "Mira Shah?" the woman asked with raised brows. She was dressed elegantly, fine creases lining her blazer, and a badge that read Senior Board Liaison, HR, Executive Wing. Mira looked up. "Yes, I thought so." The woman smiled warmly. "I'm Sophia. You probably don't remember me, but I was in your operations class at Oxford. Used to solve case studies faster than anyone. Even partnered once." Mira blinked. She did remember. "Barely? What are you doing here?" Sophia asked, noticing the unease. "I came for the group for interview, but I wasn't exactly welcomed," Mira said quietly. Sophia's smile faltered. "Group 4? That's..." She stopped herself, but Mira noticed the flicker in her eyes. "What is it?" "Thought Sophia hesitated. You might want to speak to someone at the top. You're not the only one they've treated unfairly. And then, gently, Sophia added, this company is about to change, and I think you should be part of it. That same afternoon, high above in the top floor of the glass-paneled tower, CEO Armin Reza leaned forward in his chair. His assistant, Elias, had brought him a thick manila folder. We've had multiple complaints, formal and informal, about behavior during recruitment by certain executives. I think you should see this one in particular, Elias said. Inside was a transcript, captured from internal cameras and AI-driven behavior monitors installed for corporate compliance. It showed the footage of Mira's interview, huge, humiliating. Detail, every snide comment, every smirk, the laughter, the smug glances exchanged. Armand watched it in silence. When it ended, he said only, who was she? Elias pulled another sheet. Mira Shah. First generation, Oxford alumna. Published in 4 major business journals, created a public market turnaround strategy that's now taught at 3 universities. Recently took care of her mother for a year before re-entering the workforce. Armand's eyes didn't leave the screen. And this is how we treat her. Stood up. Get me the panel who interviewed her now, and prepare the boardroom. Elias nodded and left, but paused at the door. There's something else. She's not just anyone. Check your old Founders Circle records. Armin opened the system. His eyes widened. Mira's name was listed under an internal trust established by the original founder decades ago, a special class of applicants with inherited voting potential in the company. If ever they were activated, she's not just a candidate, Armand whispered. She's one of the silent shareholders. Later that evening, in a pristine boardroom, the executives from Group 4 sat nervously. They weren't used to being called in directly by the CEO. Rumors flew fast. Armand entered without a word, followed by Elias and 2 compliance officers. I watched your interview today, he began. No greetings. No pleasantries. He pressed a button, and the screen behind them lit up with segments from the footage. The laughter, the mocking. Is this how we represent Monroe Holdings? Armand asked calmly, dangerously. Silence. She is smarter than most. Of you. More experienced. More humble. And you discarded her like a broken pen, he said, his voice low. One of the executives stammered. Sir, with respect, we thought she was a walk-in. Someone with no relevant background. No relevant background, Armand said. She wrote the paper you used to train new hires last quarter. The room froze. She's on the legacy trust list. She holds founder equity. Do you even understand what that means? Armand continued. Effective immediately, you're all suspended pending further review. And he paused. She's being invited back. But not for an interview, for something far greater. The air in the room shifted. The executives paled, and Armand ended with one final sentence. You laughed at a chairwoman in waiting. Mira was home when the knock came. Her apartment was modest but neat, filled with books and quiet strength. She opened the door to find Elias standing with a document folder. We'd like you to return, he said, offering a respectful nod. Mira blinked. I don't think not. For the job, Elias interrupted. For the board seat, it's yours. She stared at him. You're part of the Founders Legacy Trust. You've had a silent claim in Monroe Holdings for years. You were nominated long ago by someone who saw your brilliance. They left you that right. He handed her the file. The CEO personally requests you attend tomorrow's emergency board meeting. As a voting member, Myra looked down at the papers. Her fingers trembled. All these years she had walked quietly through the world. They had laughed at her, shamed her, dismissed her. But tomorrow, she wouldn't be sitting outside the glass walls. She'd be inside them, changing them, Mira whispered to herself. Let's see who's unqualified now. The halls of Lancaster and Crown, once echoing with dismissive glances and whispered judgments about the strange woman in the green dress, now rang with a different kind of hush. Respect, admiration, curiosity, the woman who had walked in unnoticed, was now the one everyone secretly Googled. Blogs were writing about her. LinkedIn was aflame with quiet speculation. Who is Amara Rafiq? She turned down the CEO role. She owns shares in the parent company? No one could understand why. She didn't take the crown that was offered. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just some applicant anymore. She was the woman who made the mighty bow, and had haunted the dreams of those who had mocked her, one by one. They found excuses to pass by her again. The receptionist, who hadn't. Yvonne offered her water, now smiled too brightly. The HR manager, who had rolled her eyes, now stopped to comment on her inspiring humility. Even Skylar, trembling with embarrassment, waited outside the boardroom after a meeting. Holding a small coffee and croissant, her eyes lowered. I got you this, she whispered. Not because you need it, just because I was wrong, Mara. Accepted it with a smile. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Grace speaks louder than revenge. One afternoon, Robert Preston invited her in again. This time not with a dozen staff watching, not for show, not for press, just two. Chairs to people, and a view of the city stretching wide beneath them. "You're still the only person I've ever bowed to," he said, smiling. Amara laughed gently. "And you're the only CEO who's offered me a title I didn't want?" "You didn't want it," he said slowly. "But everyone here does. You had something they didn't. Peace. Power not to take power." "Why?" She answered simply, "Because some people change companies, and some change legacies. I'd rather do the second." He nodded. "Then let me ask again, but differently. Grand announcements? No press conference, but a quiet update was made to the company directory weeks later. Board of Directors, Amara Rafiq. Chair of Ethics and Vision. She didn't wear a suit. She didn't change her scarves. But she brought a new culture to Lancaster and Crown. Every intern was heard now. Every receptionist knew they mattered. And the chairs in the interview room. They all matched now. Because Amara, the woman who was mocked for her dress, who was denied a glass of water, who was laughed out the door, had reminded them all. Power is not in presence. It is in principle, and true leadership starts with listening. Amara's first official initiative wasn't flashy. It wasn't $1 million merger or a company-wide memo. It was an internship program, but not for Ivy League graduates, no. For young women from community colleges, refugee backgrounds, underfunded schools, women who had the potential, but never the privilege. Girls who were told to lower their expectations. It was called the Second Chair. Initiative inspired by the mismatched chair she had once been offered. Every girl deserves a seat. The pamphlet read, and every company needs to know how to offer one properly. Applications flooded in. And for the first time in the company's history, interviews were held with warmth, with fairness, with humanity. Skylar could have left. The shame had been unbearable. Her co-workers hadn't even needed to say anything. The way they looked at her now said it all. But she stayed. And she changed. She volunteered to lead the first intern mentorship group under Amara's program. Not out of guilt anymore, but because she finally understood what power really looked like. At the final intern presentation that year, she stood beside a young black girl named Zena, who shyly showed off her app prototype. Skylar put a hand on her shoulder. "When I started, I thought suits made you strong, but real strength looks like you." Amara, watching from the back, smiled. Some changes bloomed quietly. 6 months later, Robert stepped down as CEO. The press swirled with rumors, health, scandal, pressure. But he ended it with a short statement: "I've done what I came to do. I met someone who reminded me of the kind of leader I once hoped to be. I leave this company knowing it's in better hands than mine ever were." And though Amara refused to take the title of CEO, the new woman appointed, a soft-spoken operations genius from Nigeria named Lami Bello, had been mentored directly by her. Everyone knew who the real architect was. Years later, Amara was invited onto a global business leadership panel. She sat beside world leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. But she still wore her soft green scarf, a journalist asked. "Miss Rafiq, what do you think helped you rise to such influence?" She smiled, then said softly, "I didn't rise. I returned. I never wanted a throne. I just wanted the world to remember what dignity looks like in every woman who is overlooked." The audience went quiet, then rose to their feet, and as applause filled the room, Amara looked straight into the camera and said to the millions watching at home, "Never mistake quiet for weakness. Sometimes, the chairwoman is the one sitting in the simplest seat." The end. The end.